This episode is brought to you by
Co-creation.
Welcome to Leadership Actually. It's not love, it's leadership. Welcome, Lisa Powney.
Welcome, Lee Rogers. How the devil are you?
I say it often, pucker.
Okay, what's going on?
So I am 3 days out from cycling Land's End to John O'Groats.
Oh my gosh, it's coming up now. How do you feel about that?
Nervous, intrepidated, don't even know if that's a word.
That is a word, it's a good word.
but marginally excited.
Yeah.
Gonna be camping along the way.
Nice.
And
Have
some
you camped
hotels.
much before?
Not really. So this is a true, almost like back to childhood, adventure, fundraising. It's a bit bonkers, if I'm honest. But it's for the kids. It's for to raise funds for Active Hope, an amazing charity that do wonderful work for underserved kids. And that's the purpose that I'm really excited to kind of give it my all.
Amazing. And how's the training been going?
Really good. So I've been on the indoor bike in my front room. My wife, Mand, asked me only yesterday, she said, Lee, after the ride, where's the bike going? So she is fed up of it being in the front room. She wants a front room back, which is fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough.
So we're going to make some room in the garage afterwards. But then I've been on my bike and gone to Tatton Park, and I actually feel like a bit of a cyclist now on the road, where when I started this I was frightened of the traffic, I was nervous, I didn't go out on my own, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, let's just go.
Yeah, you're a cyclist.
Well,
cyclist.
I've got all the gear and no idea, right? But
Always me.
I will, this is about getting outside your comfort zone. It's all the stuff we talk about from a leadership development point of view. It's actually putting it into practice.
Yeah.
And I'm curious around, like, when it's really tough, what's going to get you to the next mile? And when you're absolutely shattered, what gets you up the next morning?
Yeah.
Is the purpose compelling enough along the journey?
Nice. I love that, Lee. And you inspired me, because I haven't got it, but I was thinking the last time we were having a chat, I was like, oh, I want an adventure. You know, I'm always faddy. We always start a new thing. Last time was netball. I haven't actually done that yet, but I signed up, haven't done it. But, I'm thinking about it. My sisters wants us to sign up to a 10K, so I might do that. But I was like, no, I want a bit of adventure, so I'm looking into that. So
amazing.
Watch this space.
Oh, I can't wait to next time.
It won't be cycling though to Land's End to John O'Groats.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Physical.
Well, but it's whatever's right for you, isn't
That's it. Yeah, might go sing on a stage or something. Just put it out there.
Go for it.
Thanks. That's there. I'm in the choir.
Well, I know I've heard a lot about this choir. I have to come and see you.
You will, definitely, in the next church concert that we do.
Hey,
so
I couldn't do that. I was talking to our guests earlier, and I'm like, me singing, absolutely tone deaf, even though I love it.
Well, there we are. It's good for your soul, isn't it? Well, talking about our guest, shall we introduce our guest?
Go for it.
Welcome, Jo Carlin. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Listening to your cycling and thinking back to I couldn't road run, and I just decided I think it was about 7 years ago, to sign up for a marathon.
No way.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a good idea.
No.
As I say, not all my ideas are good ideas. That definitely wasn't it, because 26 miles is quite a long way.
It is
just
a
in
long
case
way.
you wondered. It's a fairly
How did
long
you get
way.
on?
Yeah, no, I finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did it, tick.
I did it. Yeah, I did
But
it.
not again.
No. Someone said to me at the end, oh, it was amazing, will you do another one? I was like, absolutely not. No, it was awful.
Love it though. Love the adventure.
Yeah.
Any suggestions for?
If you're thinking about doing a 10K, just sign up for a marathon. Just go hard.
Yeah.
And then train. And then you will have done a 10K a half.
Yeah.
All in your training. You can tick all
Just
of the bucket list off, because you've just achieved it in that one run.
Amazing.
And you don't need to do it again, because once you've done a marathon,
You can say, I've done a marathon. which everyone loves, right? Yeah, I've done a marathon.
I think this describes you. I think you're a bit of a firepower.
I don't know about
just
that.
go for it.
I definitely didn't feel any firepower during that marathon.
Well, I'm going to introduce you formally, if that's okay, and then we'll get to know you a little bit more. It's nice to have a little bit of insight already, Jo. So today's guest, Jo, you're someone who's spent your career helping organisations and leaders navigate complex transformation, culture change, and the human reality that sits underneath it all. And we talk about that a lot. You bring together deep expertise in organisational psychology, leadership and transformation, supporting organisations through periods of uncertainty, pressure and significant change, which they absolutely need. You've worked across large-scale transformation programmes, helping leaders think not just about delivery and strategy, but about their people, their behaviour, trust and the emotional impact change has on organisations. What feels particularly important about this conversation is that transformation is often spoke about in very operational terms, plans, timelines, structures and milestones, which are all important. But the reality is that change affects people deeply, identity shifts and energy changes. The trust ultimately gets tested. Leaders are expected to create clarity whilst navigating uncertainty themselves, and we get asked that a lot as leaders. So today we're going to explore this with you and what transformation really asks of leaders, why some organisations move through change more successfully than others, that's key, and how leaders stay human whilst carrying that responsibility, energy and pressure. How was that introduction?
Well, I'm like, is that me? Yeah. I have been around a while. That's what happens, right, when you've been doing the job for the length of time I have.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we were looking at your journey or a little bit more about you, Jo, underneath there may be the CV side or someone asked to describe you, maybe in the pub.
Often in the pub, right? Who doesn't love a good pub?
How would people describe you, or how would you describe yourself?
I think I've been described in many ways by many different people, but the sanitised version for the podcast would be I am genuinely curious, right? I think that's something that stayed with me forever. And I mean, I lived independently from when I was 19. And I studied, I didn't do uni in the traditional sense. I didn't have that kind of upbringing. So everything I did was I just worked really hard to get to the next level.
Yeah.
And I remained really curious about people, what made businesses kind of work. And it was a natural kind of question asking, well, why does that do that? And what does that? And how do we make money, right? And how do we pay people a bit more? And what would it mean if we weren't here in the community? So it was that, I suppose that, I'll call it curiosity. Other people might call it something different. And I've always just said yes to stuff. Like when I've been in businesses and they've said, oh, we've got a new expense system. Yeah. We need somebody to train it out, right? I was the one that would say, yeah, I'll do that. Who says, nobody would say that. That's a horrible job, right? That's how I ended up on a twin propeller plane going to West Island, right, to train it out in my really early 20s. But I think nobody else wanted to do it. And I thought, well, I'm going to do it. I'll get something out of it. And that's how I found myself. So I did my CIPD. CIPD was a huge step for me because I kind of really realised I could study and I could do that and I could kind of attain whilst working and supporting myself.
Yes.
And I've been really lucky, right? Businesses have supported me throughout the years. But that's why I did my MSc in psychological science.
Yes.
Also in the category of not all my ideas are good ideas. Because I did it during lockdown. When I worked for a life science business because I thought it was going to be, in inverted commas, quiet.
Yes.
It wasn't.
No.
Just in case you've missed that, for HR professionals everywhere, it wasn't quiet.
No.
It was chaos.
It was chaos. So I learnt about the brain during all of that chaos, which was phenomenal because I wanted to know about the research that sat behind. I wanted a deeper understanding of people. And I kind of learnt that the bits that I always kind of knew, the bits, I think we were talking about it earlier, the stuff that matters isn't the processes, although the processes are important, right? Because it gives you a frame. it's the bits that happen in between. It's the minor nudges that happen in between. It's the, you know, the call to a colleague who's having a tough time to say, how are you getting on? I know it's difficult. You're not saying you don't have to do it, but you're saying, I've got your back.
Yeah.
So people would describe me as, I'm a bit of the loving boot.
Okay.
So I'll keep the pressure on. So teams would say I'll keep the pressure on because I believe in, you know, we can achieve anything you set your mind to, but you'll get all the support that you need.
I love that, the loving boot.
The loving boot.
What a great description alongside curiosity, and that real drive really comes across. And I just think we call this the messy class. So, because not everything goes to plan.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So,
It's like my life.
We could do that whole series,
Yeah,
a whole
perfect.
series. Well, we haven't got the whole series today, but we'd love to know, in your experience of transformation and change and in that complex world, where for you have you thought it might be going on track and it's all okay, but actually underneath it was not going to plan, or it was particularly messy for you? So where is a moment that stands out for you?
Yeah, look, in a previous organisation, through all sorts of kind of more geopolitical, macroeconomic style impact, we needed to TUPE transfer out something like 1,100 people.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot across the UK and Northern Ireland, but also part of that was my own team and having to transform my own team. And it was messy because I had a team that needed to support on the transfer, and this was transferring to a different country. I had a huge consultation period, lots of, you know, I think it was 5 tracks of TUPE ongoing at the same time. This was in Northern Ireland as well, so this was also very political, so lots of political parties, and there was also a customer involved as well as stakeholders across multi-countries.
Yes. Wow.
That was really messy, and you have to be, to your team and everyone else, really calm, right?
Yes.
You have to be like literally stoic some of the time. But yeah, I felt it, right? Because it's my team. I take my time knowing them.
Yes.
You know, knowing their families, their personal situations, not just about who they are at work. And so having to manage all of that and deal with all of that, because stuff didn't, you know, I can say it now and go, oh yeah, it was fine, managed a TUPE transfer of 1,100 people, but it was messy. And not everything went to plan, and not all of the sessions were good, and not all of the decisions were great during it either. And lots of leaders felt the pressure during that, because you can't just transfer out that kind of number and not reform your operating models inside, because all of that's got to be changed as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was.
It sounds very big.
I can blink and
very
say
big.
it now, right? And it sounds great, but during it was tough.
Absolutely.
I'm just curious, was there any prep for managers in beforehand? Because often these things happen to managers or leaders and expected to miraculously go through this process or previous experience.
Yeah.
But then I'm conscious and been through similar things, not quite that big, in one go around, well, I can't prep them too much because the communication's got to go out at X point.
Yeah, and everything, because of course we were dealing with customers as well, so you've held accountable to a particular timeline. So a lot of the prep for that particular one needed to be done afterwards, or kind of in the middle of it. So lots of workshop sessions. But for a previous organisation, which was a hospitality company, we completely changed the kind of sales structure, if you like, for want of a better phrase, which included all the commercial setup. I could do a lot of that beforehand. So lots of what happens when you're in complex change, what happens to the brain, what happens, what triggers have you got? And that's ideal, right? Because you can kind of you're taking a run up, but when you're not able to take a run up, you've got to deal with it in the moment. So we had lots of, because we were a big disparate group and it was pretty much most home working. So you're looking at lots of drop-in sessions, but virtual drop-in sessions, and lots of face-to-face workshop type. You know, it wasn't formalised. It was, come, let's talk about it, what's going on for you. An awful lot of, we leaned a lot on kind of our EAP and counsellors and things like that. You've got to have that, because I'm with you, right? You can't, I think people go, oh, you're a senior leader, therefore by default, you know all there is to know, and you're able to deal with all of this, and you're able to compartmentalize, and you will sail through the change and you won't be impacted. Well, that's just an absolute fallacy. I mean, human beings cannot operate like machines, right? You will feel the emotion and you'll feel it at different times.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the one thing that works is understanding that. And a lot of the time I'll say to managers, look, think about it this way. You're at the side, and it's a kind of a weird analogy, but it sort of works. Stick with me. Your team are in the water and they're struggling. Do you want to be the kind of the manager that jumps in the water with them and struggles with them because then nobody's getting out? Or do you want to position yourself on the shore where it's tough because you can see them struggling, but you can help them get safely to shore? And that helped some managers. Some managers just think I'm weird, right? Because I use all these analogies. But it helped them. I think it helped them just position themselves slightly differently to say, I have a responsibility in this change. Doesn't mean that I can't feel things, but I have a responsibility that's greater than the team's.
I think that's really powerful, Jo. And I kind of wish I would have had that 10 years ago, if I'm honest, because I've seen leaders jump in the pool.
Yeah.
For sure, and almost like, I can't believe this is happening to us.
Yeah.
Type scenario.
It's not what the team needs.
No. But recognising actually change and transformation is tough for leaders as they're going through it and trying to process. That's often been the hardest part actually for lots of leaders that I've seen. Has been my experience.
So how did you learn that, Jo? Like in that story, how did you come to that place of, well, I've got to be calm and I've got to be in the right position as a leader? What got you there?
That's a really interesting question. I think, a lot of my early experiences, I think, like I said, I lived on my own from when I was 19. And you kind of have to, if you want to figure it out, if you want to get from where you are, you've got to propel yourself. There's only you that can impact that. Yeah. I say to my kids all the time, which they love, by the way. All teenagers love it when you say stuff like this to them. In case anyone's listening with teenagers, just say to them that only behaviour you can control is your own, and then watch them explode. I mean, I can feel the eye roll of my teenager from here, right? But that's true, right? And if you believe that where you start isn't where you end up, then you've got everything you need, right? Your brain learns, and it learns depending on the context you're in. So I had some great mentors over the years. Yeah. And mostly because I just went up to people and said, interesting people that I met along the way, and said, will you have a couple of conversations with me? I'm really interested in that. I was always quite driven, yes. But I was driven in a different way. I was driven to move from the situation I was in to a better situation. So that drove me in a totally different way. I always like reading all the time, studying, reading. I've kind of done loads of that. But I learned from people. Yes. I learned from watching people, watching businesses, testing things, kind of going, well, actually, if I did that or said that, I wonder if it would work. And you learn, and I've been lucky's not the word, I kind of correct people when they say that. It's not luck, right? It's not about being lucky. It's about actually saying, okay, what do I want to do? Where do I want to head to? And I've had and I'm still in contact with loads of those mentors over the years. And I don't think any of them ever really truly agreed to be my mentor. It was like an adoption. Or bullying, some would say, but it was like an adoption. It was like, I think you've got I love the way you are. I think you've got a great story to tell. Please, will you help me with this? Yes. So it was quite specific. In one of my old companies, I was never very good at presenting. I hated it. I was so nervous, huge imposter syndrome, but I had to present in my job. Yeah. And I worked at that point for a company that was was VC backed, and there's no prisoners right around that board table. And I was quite young in career. So my FD was brilliant. He was super calm. So I said, look, will you help me? And I find that people are really good with stuff like that. So I had like a crash course with an FD who had like no ability to give me a soft feedback. So I kind of like drinking from a hose, right? But it worked.
Yeah. And you'd ask for it as well.
Yeah, and I think like that would be my advice. That's always my advice to my teams, right? If you think actually I'd really like to develop in this way, have a look at it. Look at somebody around you that you think does it well, and then ask them for a bit of help.
Yeah, and I'm a huge advocate actually of, so when mentor schemes are set up, you know, it feels really forced sometimes, and they can work. They absolutely can work. But what's, in my experience, what happens is it's almost like too long a period for too broad a topic. Whereas if you, like what you just described, Joe, is, I like this about you, can you help me on that specific for a shorter period of time?
Yeah.
And give me the really, like, the proactive feedback. Because there, you know, you said you've sought that feedback versus it being given to you. Like, that can be a huge difference, can't it? Because equally that can be like, I don't know what to do with this. Whereas if you're on the front foot and going, I'm really seeking this feedback, whether, you know, no holds barred, I can really use that.
And you can create that safe space, right? It's because that's really important, and in particular, it was really important for me at certain points to feel safe in that space, to hear it,
Yes.
and then to go away and ruminate / sulk, right? Because it's not like I went out skipping from the rooms and thought, oh, I know he's just told me that I'm rubbish at that, but I'm fine with it. I was never fine with it, right? It took me a couple of days to, you know, reflect, accept, and then adjust and move on. You know, I mean, I say to my team, everyone gets 24 hours to sulk, right? Everyone does. When you've had a bit of bad feedback or whatever, you got 24 hours and then that's it.
But it's important, isn't
You gotta
it?
get
It's
on
part
with
of
your
the
life then.
process.
Yeah.
It is part of the process. And I think mentors have featured in every podcast, you know, with our amazing guests. I think that's a really core part of why people have been successful, and not just they came to them, you know, they kind of sought them out and found the right ones. And that's great that that's part of your journey as well. And I think we've skirted over your journey. We kind of know that at 19 you were living on your own and you got into HR and you've done some of these qualifications. For our listeners out there, could you give us a little bit of your plotted history of how you got into this complex transformational change? So what took you to where you are today?
Well, I mean, I just took a job, right? Frankly, and I was like, what do? I need to take a job. I wasn't living anywhere near home, and so I landed as an admin assistant. I won't give you the full plot history. We haven't got all day, frankly. But at 19, I landed as this admin assistant.
Yeah.
Just so happened it was in a HR team. I knew nothing about HR. I didn't even know HR existed.
No.
My mum was a cleaner, right? HR wasn't a thing. And then I just happened to work for an organisation, for those of you who remember it, called Carno Metal Box. And it was a massive manufacturing organisation that produced can ends for the Heinz factory.
Wow.
I mean, who'd have thought? and it just so happened there was 7 unions and there was all this stuff. And actually, I just got immersed in this world. And what my manager at that time figured out was I was actually pretty good at data. I was pretty good at systems. I was good at analysing. So they just started to use me more and more. And I think, you know, as a young person in that environment, you don't know what you don't know. And he could have had me like typing and filing all day, right? I mean, I would have been bored out of my mind. And so I did that, and then I did a HNC in business and finance. Do you remember those?
Yes, I do remember.
And then I realised HR was the path for me. But at that point, the business was in quite a lot of turmoil. I was very operational HR, and that's all I knew.
Yes.
Right? Very coal-face stuff. And I think my joke is I'm that old, I was pre-Ulrich, right? So the Ulrich model didn't exist when I got in HR. Everyone's like, ha, 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 and I'm like, no, it's true, right? Everybody was called HR generalist, right? There was no such, you know, we didn't specialise. You did a bit of everything. So I took, after 7 years, I sort of took redundancy and funded my own CIPD journey, because, and then I just happened to get a job. I was at college at night, and one of the girls worked for an agency. She said, oh, I've got this job doing HR and payroll at this manufacturing company. And I was like, oh, brilliant. Where is it? It was Honeywell. Huge American organisation. And that was I just say yes to stuff, right? Yes. I was like, oh, right, okay, I'll go and do it. And that was it, right? That was the journey, because America at that point, and some would say probably still is, are ahead of us in all the organisational psychology, behavioural side, and I'd never seen that. I'd never seen it. I'd only ever seen disciplinaries negotiations, you know, absence, all that kind of transactional, operational HR, which I was good at, right? And then all of a sudden, I started to dip my toe into the water, and I got put on an employer branding EVP project.
Nice.
And in the usual, I'll do it, story of my life, I got to go to America, and I got to go to all these different places, and I got put on this massive project where something just clicked. And I was like, there's this whole other piece that is much more where I like to play.
Yes.
And I just started to then that was it, right? Just snowballed. So I did SHL level A and B. Do you remember those, SHL?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Psychometric testing. And then that was it. And I realised that Honeywell was brilliant and amazing. And we closed that factory, unfortunately. But it wasn't for me.
No.
In the end, it was too regimented, too structured, too much framework. You learnt a lot. It was really important to learn. And then I kind of went to John West straight after that, and I just had a ball of a career, right, in all sorts of different sectors. And eventually, John West was the first opportunity I had to try my own stuff.
Yes.
And then that was it. Then I kind of got picked up. Sounds awful, doesn't it? But I was attracted to and was attractive to organisations that were needed to go through some kind of transformation, even if they didn't know what that was.
Yes.
You know, they would say, this is an issue, but I don't quite know how to get there. And because I love a big problem, I ended up going. So somebody once said to me, Jo, why do you run towards the things other people run away from? And I was like, somewhere deep in my psychological makeup, there will be an answer to that, but I don't want to dig into it. And I just find that really interesting. I find resolving and solving problems, but not singly, with your team, with the organisation, so that it sustains.
Yes.
And I'm quite happy to pilot stuff, right? I think that's and I don't initiative hunt. I think, you know, I hats off to the big shiny programs out there, but that's not my bag.
Yeah.
I think solving the organisational problems are contextual in nature, right? So it's never one size fits all.
Yes.
And it never really has been. And I was implementing HR systems, you know, 20 odd years ago, when it wasn't even a thing. Like AI was a thing, right? But just not Gen AI, but AI was a thing. I said that to someone recently, and they was like, no, it's recent. And I was like, no, it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are some of the things, how have you evolved as a leader through some of those times and experiences?
Oh my God, massively. If I look back now on some of my early leadership stuff, I was like, oh, yeah, you really didn't do that so well. I learned, I've always had a motto, a personal motto, that I more recently I've shared it, but it was always quite personal to me, which was every day I try and be the best leader I can be. And it sounds a bit cheesy, but I know the impact that really great leaders have had on me. I also know the impact on not so great leaders, right? It's not like I've skipped through the career and they've all been brilliant and I've had a Mary Poppins moment, right? Every time I've gone to a business. Not the case. And I know how it feels when you're not being managed well, or you're being made to feel less than. So my leadership has always been around, how do I make people feel more than?
Yeah.
So how do I add to their lives? How do I add to and not take away from? And it's a balance. Do I always get it right? No. I mean, not at all. I think I'm much more developed as a leader. I mean, I'm older. I've learned a lot more. I've had so much feedback over the years. I've sought out feedback. Yes. I've done tons of introspection. I've done all the psychometric tests in the world. I think I've had done on me, mostly because I do them on myself, and because I've done coaching qualifications. And you do a lot of that during them. And I've chose to listen, and I think that's a big thing. You can ask for feedback, but you've got to choose to listen to it. And then I've now got children who tell me what I'm doing wrong. And that helps, right? Because they don't care, right? They have no idea. They don't care that I'm their boss, right? I'm not their boss in their house anyway. And I think you have to choose to listen, and you have to choose to kind of say, which I do, I didn't get that quite right, or what do you think? Or I have to accept that sometimes my idea of the best way might sound brilliant in my own head, right? But it's not, in practical terms, it's not always going to work. So yeah, and I've learned from great leaders. But I don't know, I think sometimes you've just got to be a bit humble. And I know that's an overused word, right? But there's a great lump of humility, I think, and understanding and empathy, I think, plays a massive part in all of that. And genuinely wanting the best. I think I quite often say to leaders who are having a tough time, usually everybody wants the same thing.
Yes.
It's just the lens in which we're looking at it is different, and that's brilliant. But it just means you've got to understand the other person's lens a little bit more.
Oh, I love that. And I love your motto or your mantra. I think that's really important. And lots of leaders that are listening to this are actually going through a lot of change at the moment. I think there's probably a difference of change and transformational change. But from your lessons, what are the sort of things that you think make leaders successful through change?
God, if I had the silver bullet to that, I would be sitting on here like Wayne Rooney is, getting paid for it. I think success, well, for one, perfection doesn't exist, and that's the way I'll say to managers. It's a transformation and change.
Yeah.
And I think people use the term change and transformation in the same way, and they're not the same.
No.
Takes effort, and I think sometimes that's what people forget, and that's what leaders forget. It's a lot of effort that you've got to put in, and you're going to get depleted.
Yes.
Your battery is going to run low, because most of the time, most leaders are not sitting in the transformational change space, and that's okay, because businesses cannot withstand that level of transformation and change on a kind of long-term basis. It's really hard for organisations to exist in that state.
Yes.
My advice to leaders is the same as I do, because I think you learn from doing, is to speak to, find your people, right?
Okay.
At your level, not in your team. Going back to that analogy of in the water, out the water.
Yes.
Your team do not want to hear it from you. I know that they might nod and they might be empathetic and they might do that, but they don't. They want to know that you've got it, that you can figure it out and you can see the path even when they can't.
Yes.
So find your people at your peer level, because it helps, and have that space. Like I'll have a saying with like my peers: do you want a vent or do you want an opinion? Because depending on which one, depending on what I switch on. So if you want a vent, I'll just shut up. I'll make a cup of tea and I'll listen, and that's it, and I won't offer anything. And it's also to separate out with people what you know and what you don't know.
Yes.
And don't pretend you know it all, because you don't. Not everybody does, right? And stuff evolves.
Yes.
And then I think certainly the last one is never stay silent. I have a lot of that with leaders.
Yes.
Where because they think I don't know, right? I don't know the answer. I don't know, so I'm not going to say anything to my team, or I'm not going to say anything to anyone. I'm going to come in, and we've all had those leaders, right? And they come in, and you think, right, today they're going to talk to me. Today they're going to talk to me. Something's going to change, and nothing happens. And it's not because they don't want to, and it's not because they're standoffish or they don't care. It's because they're afraid.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fear that goes on in transformational change with leaders, and we brush over it. I do quite a bit of stuff with leaders on leading through complex change, because I think transformation and change, it's very complex now.
Yes.
Because there's so many different things, and I think tech has played a huge part in that. The speed and the pace of change and transformation is at a level I think I haven't experienced. I think post-COVID has helped do that, right? But
yeah, absolutely.
And I think leaders, if they haven't been used to that, will struggle with all that. And what you'll get is you'll get pushback, or silence. Yeah, we've all been in that team, right, where you think, they've just walked in and not said anything, or they've said morning, are they all right?
And what would be some of the key things from that? You said you work with leaders in that space. Give us one or two things that you do with them.
Yeah, sure. I ran a session recently with some leaders, which was essentially it was what did I tell me that? I think I built a session, which was, it was an hour because that's all they had. And essentially I just talked to them about what happens in the brain.
Nice.
And then what impact that has on them physically. And then how that manifests itself. But I did it, lots of pictures, right? Few words and lots of pictures. Not too theoretical. And it was more getting them to open up in that space around when you're under pressure like that, where do you go? You know, that whole freeze, flight, fight, but also fawn. So do you kind of become that person that just agrees, which is fawn?
Yes.
And I said, let's be honest, where do you go? It's a safe space. And they were really honest in that space, and that's really, like, it was just the leaders, it was just at a certain level, and I could just feel like the sigh of relief to just get it out and say, yeah, that's what I do. And then, okay, if that's what you do, it's not good, it's not bad, but what impact does that have on you, and what impact does that have on your team? And then we talk about that. But the other thing as well is, and we were talking about earlier, it's the coaching in between. So, and not necessarily always calling it coaching, because I think people sometimes, when they're in that, you know, amygdala hijack, if you like, they go through the coaching is correctional. And it's not, right? Coaching is performance enhancing, for sure. But I think when you're in that mindset, it's really difficult to see beyond that. So having coaching, but not coaching, if that makes sense. You know, lots of what questions, you know, so what would you do differently, or what, you know, or how do you feel today? And the more that I do it with the leaders, the more I see them doing it with each other, right? Reaching out to each other, or the narrative changes around the board table, which is quite interesting.
Yes.
Because you make it okay to struggle. Because we're human, right? We're not robots that walk in every day and feel nothing. And I think if you make it okay to struggle, and if you make it okay to kind of say, you know what, I'm not having a great day today. So that's the kind of thing I do with them, is just help them understand in a really short space themselves. I do use various psychometric profiling to underpin other things, right? So it's never the panacea, right? I think as an organisation, if you're rolling out a psychometric tool, whether it's StrengthScope or Insights or whatever tool of choice, and you think that's going to change the world, it's not. It'll make people be interested for a moment, but you need to help them use it in context and see how it's going to fare. And I think having a natural interest in behaviour, your own behaviour first.
Nice. I think that, you know, that's really important. Tips to understand yourself. Having gone through a lot of change, so you've seen a lot of this. We talk about change a lot out there, don't we? And say, oh, I know, are people scared of it, or we don't like it? So now, have you come to a place where you can probably predict what happens? What happens to us when we go through an organisational change? What do you see? What are kind of the trends and the things that happen to us that make it such a big thing?
I think it's a strange one, because often people will, I call it like, it's like decorating. It's 90%. You're at the precipice, right? It's 90% prep, right, with decorating at the minute. So that's
is it? I've not figured this out, so this is news to me, Jo.
This is good.
Yeah, you got a masking tape and everything, right? And then the actual physical act of the change feels quite short, but it feels quite short because what happens is all the work gets done behind the scenes, the org charts, the processes, the plan. Then we launch it, and you hear this collective sigh, right, from the leadership going, oh, we're done. I'm like, no, you're not done. All you've done is you've shown your cards, right? You've shown your hand. And actually, what I find is that teams are not resistant to change necessarily in themselves. That's not my experience. What they're resistant to, or what they struggle with, is this idea that they're no longer useful. That their skills are no longer valued, that what they were doing, you know, the person who you go to that knows everything, suddenly that's not the case.
Wow, an identity.
It's wrapped up in identity, and that's the bit that has to change before, because otherwise what happens, you know, you get change fatigue in lots of organisations because initiatives launch and then they fail. in my experience, it's because we've forgotten that actually the change happens at the behavioural level, not at process level. All your process does is help you hang stuff off, gives you a structure and a frame, which is very important. But it's at that kind of minutiae of behaviour and helping people understand that their identity is not gone. It just needs to evolve slightly, or look a different way, or look a certain way. And I think I wrote about something on LinkedIn recently around AI. We're getting a lot of this now with the onslaught, I guess, of tech. And I'm all for AI, I'm all for tech, right? I'm an advocate, not anything else. But we have to accept that it's going to change the construct of the roles.
Yes.
And we cannot hide from it. So you're getting what is termed resistance too, but it's not resistance, it's identity. It's loss of identity and the fear that sits behind that loss of identity. So if we can help people understand in context work with them on this is how your role is going to change, or this is how we think your role is going to change. What could you use this information for? What else could we do? And involve those teams. And I know it's not always possible, right? Certainly not in big organisations, but it does help, because I've worked with lots of people after the impact of transformation, on a personal level, people who I've worked with in the past that I don't work with anymore, that reach out and say, I'm having a tough time.
Yes.
And it's the impact, and that's where I figured out it's the impact on identity. Because when you're in the change, you don't see it.
No.
So when I'm in it and I'm leading it and I'm running it, I wouldn't have seen it had I not have experienced it from people I used to work with.
And I found it fascinating, having gone, because I supported employees all through lots of changes, an organisation that went from 4,500 to 1,700 in the end. So it was constant, right? Then I was put at risk. So from going from 4,500 representing to then being put under the microscope yourself, it was really fascinating in terms of, okay. So whenever I led that interaction, then moving forward, it was always slightly different, because it was just that reminder, that grounding, that humility that made you think about the behaviours, that looked at the real impact as opposed to talking about it. And I fundamentally got it wrong. I did the best that I could with it at the time with what I had, but it really shifted my whole approach. My listening dialed up tenfold as a result. Yeah. And you just reminded me there around kind of identity. And I'm curious around how, and I'd love to get your views around, the corporate message really for the last 20, 30 years has been, be all in. We want more. Psychological contract to an organisation. The world shifted. I wonder whether actually we should ask less of people in a way to be, it's your personal journey where you are for a period of time, and you will go on to have a career elsewhere. What can you take from right now?
I think that's really interesting. I think it, and it's also something I've advocated for a long time. I think, what does all in mean anyway, right? I mean, for sure, bringing your whole self to work, I'm not sure works either, right? Because you've still got to operate in the context of that culture and those cultural norms, and your personal views might not always be aligned. And working in global organisations, you really see that. So the best we can do is say, be authentic, but bear in mind that we have these like cultural norms you have to live within. I think what's really interesting now is the generations that are coming through. I mean, I'm supposedly of the generation where you stuck with a job and then that was it, right? I think I didn't get that memo, as they say, right? Because that's never been my journey. But it wasn't as acceptable then as it is now, right? Now it's really acceptable. And I think you have to accept as an employer that you're not always going to get people forever, right? And that's all right. And journey-wise, what can you provide within that period of time, and what can they provide in that period of time that's going to really advance that organisation, and just accept that it's much more fluid now.
Yes.
And there's a beauty in that fluidity, right? But it's also quite scary for perhaps more senior managers who are of a different generation that don't know how to deal with that and don't know how to recognise that. And that, I think you get a bit of resistance from that. But I think that fluidity, it's a different way of leading. And I think that's scary for some people because it's, you know, do you remember the whole how we're going to manage people from home?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, you know, the pandemic soon resolved that one, didn't it?
Instantly. Because you had to figure it out. Back to your point earlier.
You had to figure it out, right? And I think there is a bit of that, I think, that is going on in organisations now. Some of that dynamic shift away from this job for life, be all in. Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever bought into the be all in, right? That's probably an unpopular opinion. But I think it's difficult to be all in because, like you said, organisations change, and what happens when you're all in and then that organisation then doesn't want you or need you anymore? What happens to your identity at that point?
Yeah, and that's the point, because I've seen it so often with so many people.
Yeah.
And at the most senior levels,
Yeah.
you know, not just, people often think of it like you said earlier about, you know, senior leaders have got it all figured out.
No.
Well, they're all in terms of the title of that position for X period of time, but when that position is no longer there, you know, they don't get invited to the conference. Yeah. What you realise was, and I remember reading it on LinkedIn, is the invite to the conference was that leadership position of the organisation.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily the individual.
Yeah, and I helped a few ex-colleagues who have found themselves out of work, right, or in a position where they're being made redundant or they're not wanted, you know, there's something happened and they're not the right fit anymore, right, which often happens at leadership level, at senior leadership level or exec level. And you realise really quickly how much they are their role.
Yes.
And their role is them. And actually being able to separate the two is really healthy. It's really healthy because you're not your role. You know, you're much more than that. And that's why I do love this kind of what I'm seeing at the moment, which is morphing into this more of a skills-based organisations, you know, much more. And will we get there fully? I don't know, probably not, right? But it'll be good to move the dial along a little bit more.
Absolutely. And I think brought us to a place really where, you know, we've looked a lot about the nature and the behaviour of change. And you talked about previously that the pace of change, in your experience, and we hear that a lot, has never been so fast. So thinking about the future of change and leaders in change, what are the things, if you had to predict the future, what are the things that worry you and what are the things that you're really optimistic about? And you've started to talk a little bit about that already.
Yeah, I think I worry that and it's an active worry, that we see the organisations will see people as something that need to be resolved or fixed. You know, in the same way processes, and that links into kind of AI, and I think it's depending on what camp you're in, right? Because the transformation is so fast, and because it's so evolved, you know, agentic AI can do so much for organisations, you know, and that is a really positive thing. But I'm worried that what then happens to transformations becomes quite mechanistic.
Yes.
It becomes about the process and not about all the stuff that kind of sits within it. And there's then less space for, which is what we've been talking about, right? What really makes transformation stick is the behaviours of people.
Yes.
Not necessarily, you know, you can put a great system in, but if the behaviours of the people don't adapt, then it's never going to land, right? It's constantly going to just be a great system that someone's found a spreadsheet to work around.
Yeah,
absolutely. Right. I'm still seeing that now, and I've worked with some great organisations which are tech led. So that kind of worries me a little, that we're looking at transformation through a particular lens, and that particular lens is quite mechanistic.
Yes.
And actually, then people or businesses are seeing people and teams as fixable or resolvable with agentic AI or, you know, whatever. What I'm hopeful for is, or what I think actually is I'm starting to see coming through, is I'm seeing that kind of the generation coming through of leaders who are not necessarily hierarchical, not particularly command and control, are much more willing to say, I don't think I've got all the answers.
Yeah.
Can you help me with this? and that's breeding much deeper kind of cognitive diversity at that level coming through. And so I'm seeing that level coming through in a way, and it's not like I don't see it at my level either, or kind of in my generation, but it's less.
Yes.
Yeah, just because of the, the cultural norms that surrounded my generation as we were coming up through the leadership ranks, so to speak.
Yes.
But I'm seeing much more of that. I'm seeing much more kind of social mobility coming through. I'm seeing much more of that. It's less about what uni you went to, and it's more about what you can deliver. Hence my affinity to more skills based, because I think that will be a nice leveler, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not about where you've worked. It's about what skill can you bring. Because I think if you say, I only want someone, if you want a CEO and you only want a CEO who's only ever been a CEO, well, automatically you're not going to get half the population, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's much more. So I'm really hopeful with that. And I'm also really hopeful that what AI will help us do is evolve into leaders that much more focus on behaviour, much more focus on the emotional aspects, because that can't be resolved with a AI tech. And look, I mean, culture will outrun tech, right? For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm much more hopeful about that, right? We just got to help those leaders build that muscle, as opposed to helping them be more analytical, because they don't need to be anymore.
I'd love that. And I think if you're hope, let's make sure that comes through and you're part of that. That might outweigh your worry,
Yes, exactly. Well, it does. I'm an optimistic person.
Yeah,
so
I love that.
Outweigh.
So let's go for the hope.
We'll go for the hope.
And I love that that's coming through, because I think the leaders of the new generation need to hear that as well, that they've got so much to bring, and to change some of this landscape for the better is an amazing place to be. And it's great that you're part of that and seeing it and helping those leaders build that muscle, which is absolutely fantastic. We could talk to you all day. You've been an absolute inspiration when it comes to change, and really been in the weeds and understood it and had all your messy moments as you've been going through. So thank you. That has been amazing.
Thank you.
And I think almost the cognitive oversight of it all and the analysis has been really helpful.
Yeah,
And I think people listening, watching to this can take so much in terms of just, like you said, the context being really important, the advocacy for leaders coming through rather than assumptions made, the importance of listening, all great fundamentals for any leader at any level, actually. So great reminders for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So my final question is, you have interacted with lots of mentors, leaders. Who could we get in the hot seat where you are now to help get us there, that have really inspired you or you recognise as being a great leader?
That's a really interesting one, right? For me, anybody that's been through catastrophic failure,
Nice.
right? Not anything other than that, because I think through almost like public failure, and I know that seems like a little bit odd, but I think those are the type of individuals that have a story to tell.
Yeah.
Where they've learned through not always getting it right, because there's that old advocate, right? We learn mostly from failure, but I think failure is a misnomer. We learn from perhaps things not going quite as well as we would have liked. I think if you had all the money in the world, I'd probably get Gareth Southgate in here, right? Just because I think his journey's been really interesting. But I don't think you have, so no. I have to think about
someone.
Not yet, right?
Not yet.
I think people probably who've been through, I almost would say anyone in the NHS that went through that kind of test and trace and all that kind of mechanism, and also an old boss of mine who, and I can give you the name if you want the name, but an old boss of mine who's not in HR, but she led a team. She's an MD, and she led a team through not just the pandemic, because we both worked for a healthcare life science company at the same time during that, and I was her HR support, but she also had there had been issues with the area that we worked in, and there was a lot of scrutiny, around the compliance and things like that, and the learnings that she would have had from that. So I will absolutely give you her details.
Amazing.
Yeah, her name is Neve. I will absolutely give you her details.
Amazing.
I think she won't hear it, right, because she doesn't listen to any podcasts. But her humility and leadership through all of that, and her ability to kind of open up and say, actually, we're not getting this right. What do we need to do?
Yeah.
I think allowed me and my team to really drive some positive change in the organisation.
Amazing. And you've got that humility too, and really grounded. Love it. Great conversation, Jo. Thank you.
I've had a blast.
Yeah, it was honestly, it was a joy. I could genuinely listen all day. And it is that humility, isn't it? It's that human element, but it's a smart, focused look, the grounding. When you were speaking, I was thinking about application.
Yeah.
So even at skills, you've got skills, or you've previously had, how do you now go and apply it into the next role, in the next role, the next context?
Yeah. How do you strip away, all the biases that exist with where did you work, where did you study, and really just focus on what do I actually need for someone to do this role well? Yeah.
It really annoys me when my wife says to me, she's a head of marketing, she goes, Lee, what do you actually mean? Because I've not defined it yet. Thank you so much for listening, for watching to this week's episode of Leadership Actually. Be sure to join us next time, and remember, like, follow and subscribe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.